took Peter, James, and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no fuller on earth could bleach them. Then Elijah appeared to them, along with Moses, and they were conversing with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He hardly knew what to say, they were so terrified. Then a cloud came, casting a shadow over them. From the cloud came a voice, "This is my beloved Son. Listen to him." Suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone but Jesus alone with them. As they were coming down from the mountain, he charged them not to relate what they had seen to anyone, except when the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what rising from the dead meant. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
This is a little unnerving having to put that camera right on me in front, but this is actually how we began, is it not? When we first started Rebuilt and started preaching in series, we didn't yet have the equipment to record, and we certainly weren't live streaming. So this is taking me back a ways here. This is the second week of our series for Lent entitled Needy. And I would say we spoke last week, but you didn't hear this last week, so this recap is good for you. There is a God, and it's not you. And sometimes people remind us of this. Sometimes events do. And God is God precisely because God is completely self-sufficient in himself. He doesn't need anything. You do. I do. We have needs that we must attend to if we are to thrive and to survive. In fact, our whole being, by its very nature, is a vast collection of needs, simple and complex. Some are easily attainable. Some are completely out of reach. We're needy. Think about all the needs that you have. Think of your physical needs. And then there are your emotional and your mental health needs. You have a need to be understood, a need for acceptance and encouragement. You need self-confidence and self-esteem. You need meaning and purpose. You need to work. You need to rest. The list goes on and on. And on top of those needs, you have spiritual needs. And God has created us with needs. And he passes on to us the responsibility to tend to them. And doing that outweighs almost every other responsibility that we have. On the surface, that seems a bit selfish. But really, it's common sense. Because you can't help anybody until you've taken care of yourself. And if you don't, eventually, you will become someone else's problem. On the other hand, when you do, you'll more effectively be able to care for others. In fact, caring for yourself, first and foremost, is preparation for service to others. In Mark 12, Mark says, one time, a teacher of the law asked him what was the greatest commandment, and he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." As yourself. Jesus teaches that even our very ability to love others rests first and foremost on when we deny even a single one of our legitimate needs, we're not moving towards health. We're moving away from it. We're taking the season of Lent to take a closer look at just how needy we really are, how to best meet those needs, and as a result, how to be healthier. Last week I spoke of some of the temptations that we face when it comes to our needs. The first temptation is to meet legitimate needs with illegitimate ways. We are tempted from time to time to do something that we know is wrong. We might embellish our resume to get that interview. We might puff about something to try and impress people. We have real needs, but sometimes we meet them in illegitimate ways. The second temptation is meeting legitimate needs through shortcuts. We're often tempted to settle for what is a shadow of the real, legitimate need we experience. So we take the easy way out and we go for a shortcut of sorts. The third temptation is meeting our needs by worshiping them. We turn our needs into our gods to make them the whole of our life. Whether it's money or whatever, it's like an addict. Their world revolves around their addiction. And our needs sometimes become, without intention, an addiction. And we pursue them at all costs. Today I want to talk about our greatest need. Our greatest need of all. And that's our need for God. Now some of you are thinking, well, of course he's going to say that. He's the priest up there. But you might also be saying this. If our greatest need is for God, then why don't I feel that need more deeply? Or perhaps at all? Why don't I wake up every morning with a desire to connect with God, at least half as strong as my desire for that first cup of coffee? We can go long periods of time without talking to God, without even thinking about God. And to maintain a habit of prayer that can seem like a Herculean effort, certainly not a need, more like a duty. We have to do it. And then there are people we all know who seem to have it all together. They're happy, they have a good job, they have a great family. It doesn't appear that God's a part of that picture, so where's their need? So we're going to answer these questions by turning to one of the most well-known stories in the Bible. The story of Abraham. Abraham is one of the best-known figures in world religion. He is counted on as the father of three of the world's greatest religions: Christianity, Judaism, and yes, Islam. And when we are first introduced to Abraham in Genesis, we learn that he's married to his wife Sarah, and they have no children. And it's a sorrowful burden for any couple. But in this culture of antiquity, it was a huge problem socially and even economically. And remember, they're both advanced in years, so the situation is pretty hopeless. But God chooses to have a relationship with this man, Abraham. And here's how he begins that relationship. He says, "Go from your country and your family and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a nation. I will bless you and I will make you great." If he steps out in faith, as God asks him to do, God makes three promises: to make him a nation, to make him great, and to bless him. But none of that can happen without a son. So Abraham goes. He leaves the comfort of a very comfortable situation, and he risks it all for his heart's desire. Maybe that's your story. Maybe you are here today not because you want a relationship with God, but because you want something from God. Maybe it's about your job, or your child, or your husband or wife, or your health. If so, you're no different than Abraham. But here's what we need to know about God. He accepts us however and whenever we are willing to come to him. And God promises Abraham a son if he'll just step out in faith. So Genesis tells us, so Abram went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. So Abraham obeys God, but kind of hedges his bets by taking his nephew just in case he really doesn't get a son. We actually see this throughout the story of Abraham. He believes in God. He does what God says. Sort of. And Abraham is our father in faith. But if you read closely, you see that he is far from the perfect father. I don't know about you, but I find that incredibly encouraging. We don't have to wait for perfect faith to follow God. Now, it's true that Abraham's lack of faith delays the promised blessings. But eventually he grows in faith, and he is given a son. And that brings the greatest challenge that God will give him. Because at a certain point, God says this: take your son, your only begotten son Isaac, whom you love, go to the land of Moriah, and offer him as a burnt offering. Shocking, for sure. But not as shocking as this next verse, which tells us that Abraham set out to do it. The story is illustrating how dramatically Abraham's faith has grown. So Abraham and Isaac maybe 12 or 13, they make their way to the place proposed for the sacrifice. And as they go, the boy asks his father, here's the fire, here's the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb, foreshadowing Christ's death. But also another indication of faith and trust, that God will provide. We going to DEFCON 4 or what? The story concludes Abraham bound Isaac and laid him on the altar. Then, as Abraham went to sacrifice his son, an angel of the Lord called and said, Abraham, do not lay your hand on the lad. Do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God. Crazy story, to be sure. I think Isaac was probably in therapy for a few years after this incident, but God makes his unmistakable point that through our very needs, God bless you, God draws Abraham to a place of incredible faith and of trust, so much that he stands today as the father in faith of most of the people in the world. This is why we can miss out on our need for God. If you're not feeling it, it's probably because you are currently meeting that need in some other way. I think we've all done it at times. I came up with some very creative ways to do it in my previous life. We had houses, we had money, some of us had canning beds and pallets and all kinds of weird stuff. But it never filled that hole, that God hole that we need to fill and can only be filled with God. There are times that God will allow certain things to happen, things that redirect us back to Him. Often it's when we are deprived of physical needs, or when we are emotionally challenged, when we feel lost, and we're not sure why, or we're in a health crisis, or we're dealing with some kind of loss, death, grief. It's in those times that we find ourselves urgent in turning to Him. Perhaps if we've been ignoring Him and meeting our needs in other ways, we ourselves are the cause of the delayed blessings that He wants to give us. Let Him still bless us. He always wants to, at least eventually. So here's a simple encouragement for the coming week. Begin each day by saying privately, probably, God, I need you. And just say it every day for the next 6 days. In fact, let's practice right now, okay?
God, I need you.
You know, just by saying it, you'll probably be living in greater recognition of your greatest need. Knowing your needs and taking the time to meet them is not selfish. It is living in the reality that we are children of God and that God made us needy on purpose so that we'll eventually come to understand that our greatest